Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Care Partner Virtual Lounge. My name is Julia Wood, and I'm an occupational therapist, and I will be moderating our panel today. We have an amazing group of panelists, and I'm going to introduce them by name. And as they come on, they're going to tell them, tell you a little bit about themselves and their care partner journey. And then we're going to get into some questions. And of course, you are welcome to submit some questions for us as well. So first, I'd like to introduce Grove Ayers. Welcome, Grove.
Thank you, Julia. Nice to be here. Um, yeah, my name is Grove Ayers. My Parkinson's journey started in 2005 when my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And it coincided with him retiring and selling his business. And in very matter-of-fact terms, the second time that we talked about his diagnosis, he said, so now Parkinson's is my job. And he was somebody that had an extreme sense of work ethic, and he took that very seriously. He didn't want to immediately get on a regimen of drugs, so he started researching, and he went and met with all sorts of people that were doing alternative therapies, and he looked at exercise therapies and movement and Eastern medicine and things like that. And just was adamant that he wanted to control his life as long as possible. He got involved in advocacy, and one of the things that spurred me into getting involved in advocacy in the Parkinson's community later on. But with Pan, he went and testified with Congress a couple times, went and lobbied and did Hill Day a number of times, attended WPC. He just took a very active role in a couple of the Parkinson's organizations in his area of the world. In Portland, Oregon, he got involved with Parkinson's Resources of Oregon. And so they kind of became our family PD org. Um, that got me started. I was able to be sort of a member of his care team, as we used to say, um, with my mom and my sister, and then all of the healthcare professionals that got involved later on. But yeah, so that was my exposure to being a care partner, was partnering with the rest of my family for about 15 years until my dad died in 2020.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I have to tell you, I remember the days of the Parkinson's Action Network, or PAN,
Mm-hmm.
you guys. It's now, excuse me, it's now part of the Michael J. Fox Foundation if you're still looking to do advocacy. But I'm looking forward to hearing more about your dad. I probably met him at some point. So that's a fantastic story. Thank you. All right. Next up, let's meet Ruby Rendon. Hi, Ruby.
Hello. My name is Ruby Rendon. My mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's when I was 29. So, I was already married with kids, not living at home, of course, actually living in a different country because she lived in Mexico when she was diagnosed. My mom was not with my dad anymore. They've been separated for a while when she got the diagnosis. So the care partner or the caregiver portion of it, moved to me and my three sisters. So that's kind of like how we started this journey. She lived with my sister for a couple of years in Tucson, Arizona. And then after looking at some of the like the few resources that were there, she moved with me to Phoenix, where she started attending the Muhammad Ali Parkinson Center and then seeing a specialist and movement disorder specialist. And that's kind of like how I started advocating for Parkinson's too. I saw the need of my mom only speaks Spanish, so I saw the need in the Latino or Spanish speaking community, and I started volunteering. And now, I work with this community, and I do as much as I can to bring her the education, but also the resources that she's gonna need later on the road. So she's been diagnosed 18 years, so she's doing great, but I know that that's gonna eventually change with the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being willing to share your story. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more. We've got some great questions today. Thanks, Ruby. All right, next up, let's meet Robert Coley Jr. Hi, Robert. Welcome.
Hey, how are you guys doing today? So, my journey started later in life with my mom, who has Parkinson's. Was in my 40s when she was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And it's been a change, but if you know anything about my parents, this was just another um, blip in the road for them to get active in a cause that they could get behind. So we've had a quite an interesting journey through this part of learning about Parkinson's, what it actually meant for the family, and watching a very strong lady go and be very active in this community. So it's been fortunate. It's been unfortunate, but part of this is also allowed my kids to spend more time with their grandma and watch her fight through things and not let something come and stop them from achieving their dreams or just living, right? So for some people it slows things down. For her, it just made her more active, right? And she's both her and my dad's her care partner, the two of them and their fight to bring awareness to Parkinson's to lots of different people, right? There are many people who don't know about Parkinson's. It might have been referred to as, oh, the grandparent shake and everything else, and their whole you know just struggle to get awareness out there. And so they've got Parkinson's awareness recognized in the city that we live in Morgan Hill. The mayor has recognized it. The spark the light to get the blue lights everywhere. It's it for some people, you slow down. For them, I swear, it's sped up our life. Okay, there's so much going on, and it's just been something good for the family to get behind and watch a wonderful person do something she's very passionate about and spreading the word and making people aware.
That's so fantastic. And you can tell, it sounds like, your mom took this as a challenge. It emboldened her.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely that thread of advocacy that you can hear running through all your stories. And I think that's such a great message for everyone out there is, whatever way you decide to be an advocate, I think it really does help you feel more like you have Parkinson's, it doesn't have you. So excited to hear more about this. Thank you, Robert. All right. And last but certainly not least, let's meet Brian Hodgins. Welcome, Brian.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Brian Hodgins. I am the son of Linda Olson. So she's my mother, who was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease a little over 10 years ago now. We have kind of taken the challenge head on. She, her backstory is a little interesting. She's actually a triple amputee from a train accident many, many years ago. So Parkinson's was kind of another medical obstacle or journey that our family took on and kind of tackled together. They currently live in San Diego, California, and I have since her diagnosis been in school and training in many different places. And so I've been a care partner from afar for most of her journey, which, I think on some days makes it easier and other days makes it a lot tougher. She's had my dad by her side, the whole time, as well as a lot of our family. But, as things progress and change, it takes a lot more kind of coordination for all of us to, be on the same page and make sure that everybody is understanding of kind of the direction of where things are going and how we can best be there to help take care of each other and take care of my mom as well. So it's been definitely a lot of ups and downs, but one of her biggest messages is that you just got to keep moving, you got to keep going, and you got to stay positive. So we keep trying to do that.
Absolutely. That's I think such a thread here. You can really hear this thread of advocacy and resilience amongst all of your family. So thank you. All right, so you guys, I created some questions ahead of time to ask our panelists, and I gave them the questions so they could kind of let me know what they wanted to speak to the most. And so the first question that we're going to address is, a lot of people in our audience, are probably just like you, they're facing different challenges with their family member or their, friend that they're caring for. And, what are some challenges, Brian? You talked about kind of that living at a distance that you faced, and how have you worked to address those challenges?
For me, I mean, not being around and not being able to kind of see on a daily basis how things are going is probably the biggest challenge that I have. Um, Early on when symptoms were relatively mild or minimal, I think it was easier to let time go by, and my mom and dad could still travel and go do things, and it was easy to kind of forget about things. But as I think symptoms progress and things slow down or symptoms change, I guess is the bigger issue more recently. I see them in person every couple months instead of every day or two. And so the changes can appear a little bit more dramatic and more concerning. So I think we've just tried our best, my sister and I especially, to keep checking in frequently and keep being honest and asking, real questions about how things are going. And I'd say the biggest challenge is, for me being 3,000 miles away is, how can I be of assistance? How can I help beyond a phone call or a FaceTime? Because at the end of the day, to me that doesn't cut it, and I know it doesn't, it's not as much assistance as we could be doing. So I think we've just prioritized making more trips out to see each other, and making plans for mom and dad to come visit us out here, and make sure that we've got everything set up so that things can be as smooth and as comfortable as possible. But I think it's kind of twofold. I think part of it is how can we help from afar and be doing our the best we can, but also how do we deal with it ourselves and not get stressed out or sad, or you can kind of spin yourself into a spiral when you're watching your loved ones progress in their disease. And so I think a lot of it comes down to also to making sure that the local caretakers are doing okay too, making sure that my dad's not trying to do everything, making sure that other friends and family are not burning out or feeling like they have no one to help them.
Absolutely. And I have a sidebar question about that for you because my background is as an occupational therapist, and I worked in a Parkinson specialty center. And I found that a lot of times, as allied health providers, the physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech therapist, that we were the ones a lot of times that would communicate with the family about different changes or needs for support. Do you ever rely on your allied health professionals that way, or have anyone in the team that you connect with that way?
Uh, Short answer would be no. I think not, and longer answer would be not yet. I think it's a great idea to get a more objective view. I think sometimes just talking to my mom or my dad, you might get a rosier picture than may be what's going on, and so to get an honest assessment of kind of how things are going, I think that's probably a really good tool that we will be looking to use in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people I think had us on speed dial for that reason because,
Yeah.
of course we had to have permission, to talk with the family. But once they gave that permission, we tried to really support and help. So hopefully in the future that can be a tool for you.
Yes.
Excellent. And then Ruby, I'd love for you to talk about the same question too. What challenges have you faced in kind of managing your mom's care, and how do you address those?
Well, I think not for my mom not having a partner, like I mentioned before, my mom and my dad, separated a long time ago, and my dad actually has passed away like wait, what, 4 years ago. So um we had to take over her care. And when we say we, I have two sisters now and one that also passed away 8 years ago. So it was like, okay, how are we going to do this? First of all, we didn't know anything about Parkinson's. My mom was diagnosed in Mexico, and in a clinic where the doctor, she went for something not related to Parkinson's. She had a cold and like a frozen shoulder, I think. And then before she left before she left the doctor's office, she's like, "Oh, by the way, I have a tremor in my finger," and they did the balance and all those things they do, and it's like, "Oh, you have Parkinson's," and that was it. Nothing else. Like, take this medicine. I don't even think that they use this medicine anymore anywhere. For like 4 years, she was just like depressed and didn't want anybody to know. I don't even remember like how she told us that she had Parkinson's. It was just like, "Oh, I have Parkinson's." We didn't know what it was. And then, like I said, we decided it was better for her to stay in Tucson with my sister. And then, a couple years went by, and my sister called me one day, and she said, "Ruby, I don't see her well. She's really depressed, and there's really nothing here in Tucson right now." So I went online and I looked, and that's how I found the Muhammad Ali Parkinson Center, and I called. It was important for me and my family that her care was in Spanish, because that's her, like, her language. And fortunately enough, the Muhammad Ali Parkinson Center had a full services in Spanish, had a neurologist that spoke Spanish, and we started going over there. And as the three of my sisters, like two of my sisters and I, took the Powerful Tools for Caregivers training. That helps us a lot. It helped us a lot to kind of like deal with how we were going to have conversations, because when my mom started living with me, I thought I was the only one that could do things. I'm the only one that knows her. I'm the only one that knows how to take care of her. But then after we took that workshop, I realized that it was fine for me to ask for help. It was fine that it was just not me. It was, I had three other sisters that could help me with her care. And that's kind of like how we started doing it, spends most of the time with me. And then in the summer, because in Arizona it's really hot, she goes to spend sometimes in Tucson, and then eventually she like full, like 100% live with me. And I take care of a lot of her things, but I take care of her doctor's appointments and things like that. My sister that lives in Tucson, she's more like the financial caregiver, anything that has to do with like my mom going to the dentist or getting glasses, or, doing those things. And my sister that lives in Mexico, she comes to events, she takes care of her when she's there. If she, she's there for a weekend. She did took care of my father because he lived there, so she was a caretaker or the caregiver for my dad for many years, taking him to appointments and things like that. So we kind of managed that in between having two households, you could say. And that's and then the grandkids came in. They started growing up and learning that, Mami Corina, she screams at 9 and it's because of this. And now they're really involved in her care. Like, right now she's staying with my nephew. So they're really involved with it too, now that they're grown too, because they have grown with her and her disease.
Think that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that intergenerational piece, sometimes we find that I feel like people almost try to protect children, from this. But I think that there's been some great research in the UK that looks at intergenerational caregiving, and I think it's good for children, to learn those things. Like you're saying, I think it's a win-win. It's great for our elders. It's great for us. So it sounds like you guys have a great system in place, Ruby. Good job.
It took
That's
us, it took
excellent.
us, it took us a while, but we kind of have it, and not all the time. Sometimes I think that we see her like a little bit different on where her Parkinson's stage is now. But for the most part, we have conversations. And one of the things that we like to do is, she's the one that has the decision. We don't make decisions for her. She's the one that decides what goes and what doesn't go. We can advise, but that's pretty much what we do. That's it.
That's so smart. Absolutely. I just went through a bout of breast cancer with my mother, and that was one thing that really took into care partnering with her for that amount of time, was that I remember the families I had that I felt like, sometimes the adult children, it was well-meaning, but they would, kind of take that autonomy and agency away from the individual. And I think it's so important that you remember that there's still an adult, that's still someone who has an autonomy and agency, no matter how profound their dementia or their condition or whatever it might be. So that's beautiful. Thank you, Ruby. All right, let's go to our next question here. So, it can be really hard. You guys obviously have your own lives, right? You have professional lives. I'm sure you have personal lives. This is not all that you do. It might feel like it sometimes, but it's definitely not it. So, how do you balance your caregiving responsibilities with your own personal and professional needs? Let's bring Grove into the conversation. Grove.
Yeah, I think it's, and again, it depends on how old you are when you enter that journey, right? In my case, I was in my 40s, and so well established in a career. I was 350 miles away from my parents when my dad was diagnosed. My sister, who is 5 years older than I am, was also, well entrenched in a professional career in Portland. The beauty of that situation was that she lived across town, and I lived a couple states away. So that meant that a lot of the burden fell to her, especially as the years went by, and there was more burden or more responsibilities, I guess, beyond what my mom could do. But so a lot of it was an evolution where I would kind of schedule business trips to bookend on one end or the other, where I could then spend a few days with them in Portland. So even though I was further away and I couldn't be there, kind of as Brian was saying, you're not there every day or every couple days to see progression or to see little instances of things. But I was able to work it into kind of a balance of life. Our kids were old enough that they would travel and they would go, spend time with them at different times as well. So again, that I do think that intergenerational care or intergenerational involvement in care, maybe not necessarily um, the hands-on or the boots on the ground kind of things, but definitely the exposure and the perspectives, lots of times of different generations, are really instructive. Um, uh, my son was in grade school when my dad was diagnosed. And so we had a conversation about it. And I think he was maybe 7 or 8 when my dad was first, really exhibiting kind of some gait issues. And so his perspective on it was completely different than my sister or I, who viewed it as like this diminishment of what we had seen growing up. His perspective was just, oh, that's really cool that he does it that way. And rather than, oh, there's something wrong. It's just, no, that's just how he is. So I think that if you are fortunate enough to be able to um, weave the Parkinson's portion of your life in with your work life and the rest of your family life, that's a very good positive outcome.
Absolutely, it truly takes a village, and I think
Yeah.
that's so cool, the different perspective, that a child would have, and one of the studies that I loved out of the UK that looked at this too, they found, when they went into this intergenerational study, they thought that they would see, of course, improvements in mood and things like that, but what was fascinating was they even showed improvements in their movement because these were smaller children they were bringing in, but guess what? They wanna get up and move and
Yeah.
and be around those kids, and probably like your dad, he wanted to talk.
Yeah.
I'm sure to your son, and so then that gets them communicating more, so they always like them so much more than us, don't they? As grandchildren. Thank you so much,
Definitely,
Greg.
definitely. And in my dad's case, as my son got older and got involved in track, my dad had run track for the Marines and run track for Penn State, and so they had that kind of common bond, and that was a motivating factor for my dad to be mobile enough that he could go to track meets and that he could go to the state championship meet and that he could go to some college meets. And so again, if you didn't have that intergenerational tie and that interaction, you wouldn't have that same level of motivation, I don't think.
Oh, absolutely. We would even sometimes, you know, if we had someone with a lot of apathy or disinterest, if they had grandchildren that were local, we had grandchildren we brought in and trained them in the LSBT big exercises so that they
Mhm.
could partner with them at home. Or, you know, we had one gentleman that had loved to bake. And so, you know, the granddaughter would come over and bake cookies with him, but then they'd also go for a walk. So
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. I think that's a beautiful approach. Excellent. Thank you, Grove.
Mhm.
All right, so let's bring on Robert to address the same question. So, how do you balance those caregiving responsibilities, Robert?
Well, it's one of a challenge at first, and then it becomes a life. When this started to take place, my life was already very hectic. Being a single dad with two young kids that I have full time, one I have full time, and it was they're exploring their sports career. So holding a full-time job, being a volunteer, helping run a underprivileged youth basketball travel organization with lots of teams. So you have lots of kids. Our life was busy. Like there was no there wasn't a lot of space um, in there. But what came to happen is there wasn't there was change, but there was some healthy change, but also how we addressed the situation. We didn't look at this prognosis as a hindrance. Uh, we we often have to check. I can't treat her like how my mom was when I was playing as a kid and everything else. But we still did, actually, right? So just because she had Parkinson's didn't mean she couldn't come cheer the kids on. It didn't mean she couldn't support them. I'm fortunate that she's still able to do a lot of things and a lot of things on her own. We just have to make sure that she doesn't overdo it. We have the opposite right now because she is still very capable and we treat her like she's very capable. We just make sure that there's a lot of tools there. So we've won. I was in a spot where it was going to be mutual beneficial. I felt to have my parents move in with me. Right. One, it would do two things. There would always be someone around that be able to help and provide care. To the grandkids would be there. And so my daughter has been able to forge a really strong bond with her grandma and someone she looks up to. My mom was able to go out and see a lot of my son's games and my daughter's games, and it was just part of the family. In addition, we have three very large dogs. And so luckily I have some breeds that are actually really good with being supportive and helpful for people. I have a big 180-pound Newfie who is the gentle giant and kind of follows my mom around, keeps an eye out on her, right? I have a black golden retriever who wants her attention. And then I have a lab who's just a lab, and it's like, okay, it's grandma, and they've all adjusted. So between the animals, the kids, and everything we had going on in life, we've been able to keep her active. And one of the most important things with Parkinson's is to stay active and keep going, right? So you couple that with a lot of the different sporting events, getting out of the house. Now, this doesn't mean she can go all day, right? That's one of the adjustments. We have to make sure that we're taking those things into account. But the key was to keep her going, keep her active. And I say all this, and if you know my parents, this is all in addition to the zillion calls that they're doing for Parkinson's, trying to write the books, doing an interview, putting the word out there. And we've tried to keep a very active lifestyle. Some of the bigger adjustments was the adjustment for, again, single dad, two kids. we eat one way, we eat at this time, we in between sporting activities, being on a little bit more of a regimen. It didn't mean that we had to 100% change, but we had to understand that we needed to keep her on a regimen and a strict diet. And so we've made some adjustments. And even if we're not partaking at that time, we make sure she is at least following those pieces, because uh, ultimately what we want is a long, prosperous life and help it along as best as we can while being supportive. And I think for the best part that we've been able to do is we've been able to treat her like there is nothing wrong, right? And she is, there's hasn't been a change, right? She's just as smart as she ever was. She's just as funny. She's just as witty. She's still mom, right? She still will tell me I'm wrong and thinks I should do something differently. But we've all just become one bigger family, and that's been really nice.
You are so speaking my love language, Robert. The daily routine. Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea how much I tried to get families to do that? And sometimes it's a little hard, right? Because, like you're saying, it's, you've got maybe one schedule, they've got another, but it helps so, so much.
It is very important to listen to all the pieces that the doctors are saying. If you do these things in the beginning and you do them often, you will be amazed at how much easier things can be. When you start missing these things, then things start to progress and you don't get to go backwards, right? So it's once you are aware, then you have to start making the changes. And I'm fortunate because my dad, as the primary care partner, and then there's us. I'm lucky because my daughter now is 16, so she can now actually drive. So now we have 3 different people who can get her to and from appointments. Um, it's, it says it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to care for a loved one. And we've embraced it. And again, she's been a role model, not just to our family, but again, I do a lot of stuff with kids and they all get to see. Half of them don't even realize my mom has Parkinson's, right? Because she's still out there, one of the loudest people cheering. She's still doing things. People come, she's cooking dinner. I mean, I think the biggest piece is to treat them like they're a person and they're not disabled. You augment, you help, but you still allow them to do what they can at the stage that they're at, because that helps them feel more alive and feel more normal. That this isn't going to go away, but how can I help that person feel like who they were and that nothing's changed? And so I mean, if you have the opportunity to meet my mom, it'll be a blessing there. She's a very lovely person, but she does a lot and she's definitely a fighter.
It's just I'm literally speechless because I'm so just pleased. And it's one of those things, like you said, I think that's such great advice, Robert, that you do that work on the front end, you pay it forward, you do the routine, you get the activities, you keep them active, and it literally makes it easier to manage in the long run. So smart, so smart. So, all right, somebody on the call that I think has some difficulty balancing professional life with caregiving because you're a doctor, Brian. Would you like to talk to us a little bit about how you balance all of this?
Yeah. I guess it's tough. There's kind of two brains that you have in this situation. So you always kind of call it, you have the doctor brain where you look at everything objectively and you know what Parkinson's disease is. I do my best. I'm not a neurologist. I am not an expert in neurology or anything by that stretch. So I do my best to stay out of trying to learn more about it, because I think that's how you go down the rabbit hole, especially on the internet and the resources that you may not totally understand. But I do understand the disease and kind of where it goes and what it can lead to. So keeping that separate from caregiver brain or being a son, I think is kind of difficult. you want to use some of that because it does keep you grounded, and it, you know, kind of keeps you living in reality of, hey, mom has Parkinson's and we're gonna have to deal with certain things as they come up. And you know, again, kind of to what Robert was saying, you hear, you know what you're supposed to do. You know that you're supposed to keep moving and keep active and have people around that can help do things. But at the same time, you're always looking out for maybe some of the signs of progression, which I think can be a negative thing. You know, I've tried to just take it as enjoy the time that you have right now, because you know it is only going one direction, and that's probably my least favorite part of this disease, is that it's a one-way road, and the things that you can do this year or today are going to be different in a month or 6 months. So, you know, I think separating professional and personal kind of thinking about it has been difficult. But at the same time, I think taking little bits of each part, you know, enjoy the time now, but also in the back of my head, understand that things may get to a certain point where we can't do these things anymore. It's a balance for sure. And I think early on, you know, you get the doom spiral and you think everything is going to fall apart and time is going to waste away. But, you know, it takes a while. And so all the years in between, I mean, those are really good years. And, you know, if anything, they make you appreciate them more because you just know that you're enjoying the best possible times that you can. You know, my mom has been very good about finding activities to keep moving. And when she can't move as much, then she'll do something different. And so, you know, she has gotten big into painting, and you know, something that she never did before, but it's something that she can easily do with one arm. And even if if she's having a slow day, she can still, you know, put the paintbrush into the paint and put it on the paper, and whatever comes out is good, and that's a win. And you know, she would always say that, you know, if she can get through the stiff periods or the anxiety or just the bad feelings, then that was a winning day. And it was, you know, she was beating the disease for that day. And so I think, you know, like you said, the professional part, like I try to not think about what it's like to be the physician or be the person who has to give the objective advice and prognosis. The personal part is, you know, enjoy every day. When something funny happens, laugh about it. When something sad happens, cry about it. But definitely, you know, don't just think, well, this is it. You know, this is it. This is a bad disease. We're gonna have to struggle through this. Enjoy everything that you can, and just cherish each day that you get to spend with them. And you know, again, tying into not being there all the time. I mean, that definitely sucks. And there's been plenty of times when I've, you know, asked my wife if we should just uproot our lives and move back home to be a little bit closer. And everybody in my family says, no, don't do that. We don't need to do that right now. But it is hard because, you know, you know, the sand is kind of rolling through the hourglass. And so you want to be there as much as you can. But, you know, at the same time, you can't let the disease rule your life either too. You got to make sure that everybody is still doing what they need to do. And as long as everyone's happy and on the same page, I think that's been our biggest blessing, is to have a family that communicates very well. You know, no one's hiding anything. Nobody is avoiding responsibility. So that's kind of how I've balanced those two aspects, I think.
That's so many good points. And I think that, you know, that idea of perspective taking that you're talking about, I think is so crucial. And my mom said something recently when, because I kind of felt the same way with her bout of breast cancer. Like, I just need to move home, you know, and because she's had multiple bouts. And she said something I'll never forget. She said, I know you love me no matter where you live. And I know I can always call on you no matter where you are. And so I think, like you're saying, as long as you communicate with your family and they know that, because I know there has to be some guilt associated with that, because there definitely is for me. You know, that they know we're there. They know that we would be there, you know, in a heartbeat if they need it. And so that communication piece, it sounds like you guys are doing beautifully. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So another question here, because several of you have kind of spoken to this a little bit. I want to pull a couple more people into the conversation here about that impact on family dynamics and relationships. And I know Ruby, you know, we've talked a little bit too about how culture sometimes can play into that as well. So Ruby, would you like to lead us off and kind of how, you know, Parkinson's has impacted or influenced your family dynamics and relationships?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, we come from a, my mom is from Mexico, and we're really strong Mexican family, where I think what happens is in their culture, we don't think about certain things that we actually have to think about. So, for example, like, placement when that time comes, having your documents ready for anything. It's like we don't talk about those things like DNR, or like what are your wishes. It's just like a conversation that you don't really have in the culture that we have. We started doing that a little bit more with my mom lately, just because we have had some family members passed away, and that's kind of like when we take advantage of that, and that conversation, starting that conversation. But even like that, I think she changes her mind a lot also. So there's sometimes she says one thing and then she says another thing to my other sister. So uh, but I think that, you know I think it's the same for everybody. Once somebody gets diagnosed with Parkinson's, the diagnosis is not just for that person, it's for the whole family. I think just in our Mexican or our Latino culture, it's a little bit different, because we have that mindset of like, oh, we're not putting mom or we're not putting that in a home or anything like that. It's kind of like, even like talking about palliative care. That now it's a little bit more inclusive in a lot of the diseases. It's like, what is it, for palliative care is meaning like, oh, you're going to help me, just to end my life, at the end of the road. And now it's different. And it's something that we're also trying to teach to our community. So it's just, and then also getting the whole family involved in the care, like, like you mentioned, and Robert mentioned it before. My mom lived with me, but then also my kids, and then yes, they move out, but they're always aware of, what's going on, and they're really present on my mom's care. Like, she has an appointment tomorrow, and my 22-year-old is gonna take her to the appointment. He's scared, but and they're learning that those things are things that they can help me with, because I'm not always available. But one of the things that, and also that Brian was saying about kind of like separating like the two things about professional and things like that. One of the things that I always say, I don't want to ever not be my mom's daughter. I always want to be that first. I never want to be like, oh, I'm her caregiver. I don't even call myself a caregiver. In Spanish, we don't say cuidadores. We try to change that now to aliados de cuidado. I'm her ally, in her care. She might not say that she needs care. I think she does, but I know she says she probably doesn't. But that's the things, like, like Brian was saying, I don't want to like just be the caretaker. I want to be her daughter. And if she has to yell at me one day, or she has to give me an advice, or she has to do things that I'm probably not gonna be like comfortable with, I just don't want to lose that. So, and like, I think, like I said, it's just trying to change the culture a little bit among the Latino or Spanish speaking community about those things, that it's okay to have, your directives, and things like that, so you don't leave your family with those decisions that you could have like done before or ahead of time. And now I think the younger generations are a little bit more aware of that, and they're like trying to teach us, and the grandparents also, like, why we should do this, or things like that. So yeah.
That's really beautiful. And we had the doctor in our COPE clinic at Penn was from Columbia. And when we would start talking about issues with like long-term care and placement, and he was like, we didn't have these problems. He's like, these weren't conversations we had. You took care of your family. And I've just always thought that was so beautiful. And I think too, a message that I'm hearing from all of you is it sounds like how much stronger this makes your families, in so many different ways. I don't hear anyone saying it, destroyed our family and broke us apart. It sounds like it really bound all of you together. And that's really, really beautiful. I'd like to bring Grove in to comment to this same question. We haven't really heard from you about the family dynamic, Grove.
Yeah, I mean, I think for our family anyway, for me, PD changed the way we viewed the world and the way we moved through the world and the way we supported each other. I It strengthened ties and it gave us new ways to show solidarity and support and care, and advocacy and all of those manifestations of love, right, in different forms. Um, and those are, I don't think that's unique to the disease communities, but I think that lots of times when there's this kind of singular focus on here's this elephant in the room, here's this thing that we all have to interact with, that it does change your perspective about your life, your care partner's life, um, and it presents some real unique opportunities to strengthen those ties and to be able to show that some of those opportunities to show love and care and advocacy and support. And I like, as Ruby's saying, like, just those cultural differences within the family dynamic. If those are things that might get otherwise sort of repressed or something, but there's that common experience that you're all kind of in it together and you're working on it together, that it's pretty powerful, I think, in a lot of families, and gives a lot of families a different sense of purpose or a different shared experience. We all live pretty siloed lives lots of times, and we get very involved in our own stuff. And the partnering with and supporting your loved one that is living with Parkinson's is like a shared village responsibility. So
Absolutely well said. And I'm not sure you guys, if you're all familiar with Kristen Neff's work, where she talks about self-compassion and how we are compassionate toward ourselves. But one of the elements of that is that shared sense of humanity. So I could see where having even that sense of that within your own family, of not being alone, of this being a shared experience, can be very supportive and cathartic. Thank you. We got a couple of great questions from our audience, you guys. So I'll have all of you stay back on screen at least until we figure out who wants to answer what. I think this first one is definitely directed more toward Ruby. So she says, culturally, as a Puerto Rican, we don't really talk as much as we should. So she said, what are your opinions on, and anybody who wants to take this question can, what are your opinions on being a home provider versus putting your parent in a facility? Are there resources for finding the right facility?
Yeah, I think the first the first thing my family and I did, we learned about Parkinson's. That's the first thing we did. And I, after, I could probably say right now, after 18 years of my mom being diagnosed, I can see Parkinson's in her now. I don't think I was able to see Parkinson's in her like maybe 2 years ago. So now as a family, we haven't had this conversation, and in the back of my mind, I always think about the first 18 years ago, well, like 14 years ago, the first time we went to an event, a Parkinson's event, it was a picnic, and I saw people in wheelchairs, I saw people in walkers, I saw a young man, not even 40 maybe, with Parkinson's, and I'm like, he doesn't have Parkinson's. And my, like, no. The first thing that came to my mind was how long it was gonna take, how much time it was gonna take for my mom to be like that, to be using a walker, to have to use a wheelchair. And then, you get all this thoughts in your mind. It's like, who's gonna have to stop working? Who's gonna have to, like, like, be a stay at home with her and things like that. So now that I think more about it, and we have learned a lot about the disease, and me being part of the organization that I am, I think has taught me that there's a lot of resources out there in the community, You just have to find a trusted, a person, or like like if you have in your clinic a social worker, your doctor that can guide you, a case manager that can guide you to those things. I think that's the kind of like where you start. What is it that you want to achieve? If it's the staying your having your loved one stay at home until the end, then there's a lot of every state is different, but there's a lot of resources that you can use. In Arizona we have the Altex, or the area agency on aging, or the caregivers association, where they like little by little you can find those things. But I think having a conversation with your loved one, and seeing like what is it that they want to do, what because my mom always say, it's like, mijita, I don't want to be a burden for you. And sometimes she'll see me like, now she uses a walker, so when we go out, like she sees me putting the walker in the car, taking the walker out of the car, and she's like, ay, mijita, like I'm like, you're always struggling with me. I'm like, mom, as long as I can do it, I said, I'm gonna keep doing it. And as long as you can do it, I'm gonna keep doing it for you. So when you tell me you can't no more, then I'm not gonna push you. I don't have to, if you don't want to, but those are the things that I think it will be like learning about the disease, learning what your loved one wants, and then having a conversation with the whole family and seeing how you can support each other, or making the best choice for for the loved ones.
Absolutely. All really good points. And a couple of things I wanted to add in, you guys, that I saw as a clinician over the years is sometimes I think we think about, putting someone in a facility as this really terrible thing. But I saw some people go into some care settings. They really thrived. They had people around them that were also coping with some of these challenges. They had people their age to kind of meet. So depending on, the center, some of them were actually much happier, going into a care setting. And resource to remember too is the Parkinson's Foundation has what are called the community partners in Parkinson's care. And these are long-term care facilities, not maybe necessarily I can't speak to the cultural relevance or sensitivity to them, but they are trained specifically in understanding and knowing about Parkinson's. And you can find more information on their website about the centers that participate in that program and are trained with that program. All right, great answers. We have another amazing question from the audience. And so I'm going to let anyone take a stab at this who wants to. So, for any of you, are your children fearful after, seeing Parkinson's of you possibly being diagnosed after seeing what's gone on in your family? Grove, I see you nodding. Do you want to answer first?
Um, yeah, we've had sort of veiled conversations about that, I guess. I have not done genetic testing for a couple of reasons, but I just haven't availed myself of that opportunity. Our son, when he was an NCAA D1 athlete, part of that process is that they do genetic testing, ostensibly for a couple of conditions. Sickle cell is one of them. But so they did a full, pretty broad spectrum genetic workup, and he notified us that he does not have any of the markers. But yeah, that's always, I think for some of us anyway, that's always in your mind. I had a conversation with the executive director of an independent Parkinson's organization a few years ago, and just talking about like transitions and getting older, and she was looking at retiring. And she said, "So tell me this: what's your disease that you think you're going to have?" And I thought, well, I've like part of me is bracing for having Parkinson's, and just because that was again part of my worldview, and seeing things in my dad that I see in myself, just other attributes, not necessarily the same physicality, but so yeah, that's always part of that. I think that probably for a lot of children or grandchildren, it might not be expressed, but I think that that's ever present.
I would absolutely agree. I think that we get that question a lot from people who are too scared to ask their family member.
Right.
Absolutely. So anyone else want to comment to that question?
I don't want to know.
Okay. That's fair. That's totally fair.
Live
No,
life
I,
as it comes, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. My mom did the PD generation study. She did that. She's okay with me sharing that she's negative. You know, she doesn't have any of the genes they're studying in that specific study. But um that's one of the things that I think when she did it, she wanted it to know because she didn't want to leave us with that. Like, I leave anything, I don't want to leave Parkinson for you. And as far as for my kids, I don't think they have ever, like, we have never talked about having a concern. Especially maybe because my mom did the study and came out negative. It's like a little one something that it's less undermined. But same as Brian, I don't think that I would like to know either.
And then Robert, it looks like you were going to chime in too.
yeah, I was gonna say, because I have the young kids at home with this. If they have a concern, uh, they haven't shared it with myself. They may have uh, spoken with my mom about it, but I think right now, while it's all what they're more concerned is at some point in time, grandma may not be here, right? And it's let's spend as much time as we can. I don't think they've made the correlation that there could be a generational thing. It could be passed in the line. I don't think that's something they've comprehended. Right now, it's just okay. Here's grandma, but since she's still so active in the stuff that they're doing, I don't think at this moment in time they've made that, oh, is this going to happen, right? Is we've tried to make everything as comfortable and normal as possible at home while still providing the care that my mom needs. So it may not be something that's come up right now, and honestly I actually didn't think about this until this question was raised. I think it's just something that we would probably address and deal with later when it comes up, if it comes up. And if it doesn't come up, then probably won't address that with the kids. But yeah.
Absolutely. Why make a problem if there's not one?
Yeah, I mean, the
Absolutely.
concern is grandma, right? So that's where their focus is.
That's wonderful. You guys, we're getting such great questions from the audience. So this one, I'm sure, possibly, I know you guys have dealt with this. So was there ever a time when your parent was in denial of their diagnosis or the stage of progression and refused to take medical advice of doctors or therapists, which then put you as the child and care partner in a difficult position in trying to help them? So do you have any advice for people when that happens?
I had a situation where my dad had the benefit of living in Portland and having OHSU as one of his tools at his disposal. And after a consultation and meeting a couple of people in support groups that he had DBS, he decided he wanted to have DBS because he just wanted to try every single thing that would help improve his quality of life. He really wasn't a great candidate for DBS just because of his age, more so than anything else. And I felt like that was entirely his decision. And when his MDS kind of tried to dissuade him a little bit and said, yeah, you know, you're not really the, like, I wouldn't have suggested this therapy for you. And he was resolute about it. And my perspective was, this is your life, this is your body, these are choices that you get to make. And as Ruby said, you know, we can offer some advice, we can offer our outsider perspective. You know, I can tell you what the neurologist told me confidentially or whatever, but it's up to you. And so he had DBS. It was a good, nice, successful, relatively easy DBS. But after the fact, um, his view on it was that it actually made his gait issues worse. It didn't solve, he didn't have wild dyskinesia. So it resolved some things, but you know, maybe it wasn't a net positive. Um, and I'm, you know, I think that people have free will, and that it's easy for a child or a care partner to make a decision in context of how it's going to affect their life, how it's going to affect the family, whatever. Um, but in large part, I think those care decisions are up to the individual, and it's up to them to, you know, have that perspective and look at that greater context of what their decisions, what the actions of their decisions are going to be.
Absolutely. And, just to comment to, DBS for those out there, a great thing that is available at many of the centers of excellence are different screening clinics. So they really look to see if what you hope to get from DBS is actually possible, because we would sometimes have people come into our clinic and they wanted it to fix their freezing of gait, and it doesn't do that.
No,
And
no.
so then that's maybe not a reason to have it. So I think that's a really good point of trying to balance that autonomy and agency that we want people to have, but also with that education and information and really understanding of these treatments. Absolutely. All right. Anybody else want to take on this question?
Yeah, I think I don't think my mom has, you know, we have had an issue with that. I just, the job that I do, I'm actually the Spanish language program coordinator for the Muhammad Ali Parkinson Center. And we have all this amazing resources. We have classes, we have, exercise classes and all these things and webinars and education. And, and she's, I think I'm not gonna say she's the worst, but sometimes I'm like, Mom, are you gonna go into the class? Mom, are you gonna do this? Mom, are you gonna do that? So I have to be kind of pushing her a little bit. But then I know she might not having a good day or things like that, but it's more like me trying to not be the one making the decision, but just, you know, telling her. But it's funny, like I tell people that I deal with a lot of people with the head Parkinson's every single day, but I maybe because she's my mom, I'm the one I have the least patience sometimes with her, and that's something that I'm trying to work on. And same thing with my DBS. My mom had DBS like almost 3 years ago, and the decision was made as a family. One of my sisters was like kind of like nervous about it, but then the other two were like, yeah, let's do it. My mom was really um, you know, excited about it. She had a lot of dyskinesia. She took a lot of medication. Um, her DBS was great. After the surgery, she had a little bumps in the road. She had to stay in therapy for like 10 days. She was in therapy uh, for the days until her second surgery to replace the battery. And I felt, because I was kind of like the one that it was not pushing it the most, but I was like, this is going to be great because I know a little bit more and I do the education in Spanish for people who's going to have DBS and all those things. But when that happened, then I felt like, oh my God, did we make the right decision on doing this? Did I push too much on her saying yes? It did help a lot, but same as thing what Gro was saying, her gait, it's not the greatest. I know that doesn't help, the DBS doesn't help with that. And also, her speech is a little bit compromised a little bit more now. But other than that, from 6 medication, 7, she went to 3. These kinesias are like really low. So I know that we did good, but when that happened, um, and from all the people that could happen, it happened to her. And I was grateful that it happened to her because I had the resources where I worked to be able to help her. So, that was one thing. But yeah, sometimes it's just like pushing her a little bit. That's it.
But I'm sure. I'm sure. All right, Brian or Robert, do you want to speak to this question at all?
I, I haven't really had any issues. I think from day one, I think the diagnosis of Parkinson's was, I mean, it was shocking, but I think to my mom, it actually answered some questions as to why she was feeling some of the things she was feeling. So, I think it was maybe a little bit of a relief in some ways that we had an answer. And for her, it was mostly, I think it was a lot of anxiety. It was a lot of inner restlessness and turmoil that was not really explainable. It was more than the usual, like mom just being mom anxiety. And she didn't have, obviously she doesn't walk a whole lot, so it wasn't gait issues. And really she's never had much of a tremor. So I think, she's had different kind of symptom profiles. So it was a little bit more of a, okay, we have an answer, let's get a plan. And so she's always been from day one very much on board with, seeing the doctor, listening to what they have to say, taking the medications, and making sure that we have a plan to deal with everything. So, thankfully I haven't had to deal with somebody who, is in denial about something, or, has I've done my research and this is what I think I need to do. She's been a good patient, I would say, which, is hard for a lot of people to do. But she's been really good about that, and has from day one been really big on the non-medical things like movement and all the exercises she can possibly do, and now the painting and all these things. So I think I would count myself lucky that we haven't really had that hurdle to deal with. And thank you
Absolutely.
for doing that.
Yeah. Robert, anything you want to add?
I mean, I I think in the beginning, um, let's be honest. I think we went through the gamut of emotions, the anger, upset, why me? This is not it. This can't be happening. Um, and I think if anyone says they don't go through that, that they're not being completely truthful. Um, that was the initial action. This camp is, why is it happening to me? This is it. And oh, by the way, let's just deal with the elephant in the room. This is the end of the world, right? That's probably the toughest part to deal with when you're dealing with your loved one, is that initial everything's over. And once you've dealt and been able to um, address and deal with that, then we move to the other pieces. So I think how you transition from uh, those initial real responses is how you deal with the things following. And once we had a positive, okay, well, this is what's happening. It's not the end of the world like you initially think. Here are the things that we can do. You can live a very long and productive life as long as we do X, Y, Z. So I think as things happen, it's not so much that they don't want to take a medicine or do an exercise. I think a lot of the medicine for us has been more, this isn't working, let's try a different one, right? That was what was it affecting. And sometimes the exercising is, again, before Parkinson, were we exercising every day? Probably not. Should we have been? Yes. So now all of a sudden I'm expecting, you know, my mom to exercise every day when that may not have been something we were doing before the diagnosis. Right? So can I say, oh, she's not doing something? No, I mean we're still living our lives, but now we're doing the other pieces. So I don't think it's been a struggle, but you also have to realize and recognize some of the side effects of Parkinson. Is she not taking her medicine because maybe she forgot? We don't know, right? There are a lot of different factors, and that's kind of like where we all come in, is to help notice those things, augment those things, and help out. And I think as long as we're positive and we're helping and not forcing, right? Because that's the big thing. Like, we're not dealing with kids, right? We're dealing with adults, and by the way, for most of us, adults who were telling us what to do, right? Giving us the advice. And now, okay, hey, here I am. I am trying to provide care along with my dad. And I'm telling you, you might need to do this because this is what the doctors have laid out. That's the person who is telling me for my whole life. Right? I'm having kids. They're the ones giving me advice. Now the roles are slightly reversed. And so it's just one of those subjects where you do it gently, quietly, and recognize that some of the reactions that you're getting isn't that person, is just a side effect of what they're going through. And I think if you do it like that, I don't think I'm fortunate. I shouldn't say thing. I'm fortunate in my situation. I am not dealing with a person who doesn't want to do these things. Right. So I know everybody's situation is different. And right now our situation is very nice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, you guys. So we have time for one last question here. And so I want to kind of merge a couple of things, a question I had with kind of a comment that's come in, and this gives you a moment to have some final remarks here. So what advice would you give to others who are just beginning their journey as care partners? And keeping in mind a comment that we got from the audience from someone who feels that, they're hearing how much you guys are doing and they feel kind of guilty, like they're not doing enough. So how would you advise someone get started and maybe kind of take those first steps toward being more active as a care partner? Who wants to go first? How about Grove? You're unmuted, so I'm going to pick on you.
Okay. I think there's a combination of factors I think that are really important. I think if you're just starting on that journey, I think that you need to remind yourself to listen to the needs and wishes of the individual for whom you are caring, a person with Parkinson's. I think to think in context, to try to view things rather than, oh my gosh, this is this immediate thing today, is to just take a breath, take a little bit of perspective and view things in context. And maybe first and foremost is to be patient. Be patient with your loved one and be patient with yourself in the journey. That diagnosis, I think that Brian alluded to, as a family diagnosis. And so if you're on that journey together, you're not always hitting the waves at the same time. And just to be patient and give yourself a little bit of grace and realize that one of the things my mom always says is all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. And that's kind of been a family mantra of ours. A day when my dad was physically struggling and just couldn't get the exercises done or whatever, that would be my refrain was, well, all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. And maybe it's not enough every day, but it's enough today. And I think that the other thing that goes hand in hand along that journey is to, much in the same way that the person with Parkinson's needs to practice self-care, so does the care partner. And to me, those two most important things are exercise and human connection. And Dr. Laura Nishley refers to human connection as the social nutrient. Her practice is focused on nutrition and in Parkinson's and other conditions. But that idea that the nutrient value that we get from interacting with other people sustains us. I mean, we're part of our human makeup is to be social. I think those are important
Well said.
components.
Well said. Thank you so much for that. All right, Ruby, how about you go next?
I think not thinking that you have to do everything yourself. Not losing, like I said before, not losing that I'm the daughter, I'm the husband, I'm the wife, go if you're the husband, go on dates, take vacations. If you're the daughter, take your mom shopping, or or if you're the sister, have a sister vacation. I don't know, something. You don't have to be doing, like, we're doing this because we've been in the community long enough, or I don't know, like, you don't have to do a webinar, you don't have to go do public speaking or something, but knowing what your loved one needs and respect what they want. I think it's important. And like I said before, educate yourself on the disease. Like, know what everybody that has Parkinson's is different. Not because if you go to a support group and you see somebody that has a lot of tremors. My mom doesn't have a tremor, so everybody is different. You're not Everybody's going to have different symptoms, and it's going to progress different, but the progression is going to happen. If your person with Parkinson doesn't do enough exercise or therapy, goes to the doctor, takes medication on time, of course, it's going to progress faster. But if they learn and they do all those things, I think, and you just being that support system, then they will see that they can live a long life with Parkinson's. And yeah, and that's it. Involve the rest of the family, involved, depending on your situation, involve the grandkids, involve the cousin. I have a cousin. There's always going to our events and things like that. My kids, we do a walk every year, and they're all there. Even my daughter-in-laws, they're all there. And people that I have. And once you get into this community, it's like you have family forever. I met Grove like in 2016 at the first WPC that I attended, and it's like, you create all this bond, and you create this community that it's, at the beginning, I always, like that somebody said right now, it's like I always ask, like, why my mom? Like, why her? If there's like 10 more siblings. And after a while, I stopped asking why. I said, like, what do I do with this now? What do we do with this diagnosis now? And one of the things that I've been doing is advocating for her, advocating for the Spanish speaking community, that to have more resources. And and she's been part of that journey with me. She's really proud of what we're doing as a community, where she's really proud of me. And those are the things that I cherish the most. And those are the things that, once she's not here with me, I am going to keep for me, and keep fighting until, we find a cure.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Ruby. All right, Brian, why don't you give us some words of wisdom next? Like you haven't given any this whole hour. You guys have been amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like don't feel like you have to do a lot, right? I think the biggest thing is, like you said, we're on this panel. Some people get really into advocacy, and they dedicate a lot of time and energy to it, and that's great. We need people that do that. But at the end of the day, it's really about what you need to do for your mom, dad, husband, wife, whoever it is that's been affected. I think Robert has a good point. Like the first whatever day, week, month after you get the news, I mean, it's a total gut punch. And I think it's very normal to go want to put your head in the sand and pretend like nothing's happening. that's normal. That's okay. Don't feel guilty about that. Once you get over that and kind of deal through your emotions and whatever grief you're dealing with, then you just have to take action. And everybody takes action in different ways. It can be, support with a phone call. It can be moving in and doing everything together. So all those things make a difference. And at the end of the day, like you can't beat yourself up. You didn't make this diagnosis happen to anybody. All you can do is everything that you can to make things a little bit better. Be open to learning new things and changing your perspective. And at the end of the day, like I always try and remind myself, just every time I have a conversation or I see my mom, just give her a hug and say I love you. And that's every day that you can do that is a good day.
Well said. Well said. All right. Last word, Robert.
Well, what I want to say is whether or not you're doing enough is not the question. I think the first thing that you have to come to terms with is it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And you determine how long that win is. If you choose and do nothing, that win is smaller. If you choose to get involved, help, eat right, get active, that win is very wide, right? It's really up to you and the person and the family and the people around to determine how long your loved one is going to be with you. How much you do, again, is what is good for you, right? What is good for us may not be good for you. People are in different stages of their life, they're in different stages of what's going on. You can't base what you can provide based on what you see other people to do, right? If you don't live nearby, or you may have a big family, you got lots of other obligations, you just can't do it. The little things that you can do that you're able to do will go a long way. But just because someone says, okay, hey, I'm moving this person in with uh, myself and I'm taking care of them, doesn't mean that someone else with the same situation has that ability. They may have a full house, lots of kids, and it just wouldn't be the ideal situation. Because obviously, one thing that we haven't really talked about, one of the things that you really want to try to do with someone with Parkinson's is decrease the amount of stress. Right? We don't want to add stress to their life. So you may say, I want to take care of them, I want to bring them in, but if it's not something that's going to be peaceful and relaxful for them, that's not the right thing, right? So I would say you determine what works for you, and you can always want to do more and do more as it equates in your situation. Every situation's different. Um, and that's how you can best help uh, your loved one who has Parkinson's, right? Remember, everything that we do is to help that person, but you first have to come to grips with there is an end of the road. We just don't know when, right? I'm very lucky. I'm very fortunate that my dad is my mom's primary caregiver, right? The two of them are always together. We're lucky because I'm there, right? And so we have multiple people, right? So we can offload. I can give my dad a break. There are ways for us to take some time for ourselves, and I think that's a big piece. Like, this isn't a small overture. This isn't something that's going away. There's always going to be involvement. And by the way, the situation that we're in right now isn't going to be the same a year or 2 years from now. It may be the same a year from now, and that's wonderful. That at some point in time, we're going to move from the stage we're in to a next stage, right? And it's a completely fluid situation that you have to be agile and adjust with. And so again, so I think someone asked the question of whether in-home care or out care was the way to go. Again, you have to be just as honest with yourself as they are with the diagnosis. if you choose to do the in-home care, you have to be able to provide everything that comes along with it. If it's not something that you can do, then you upfront say, that's not something we can do. How can we best do the situation? Because change isn't something that people with Parkinson's like a lot. They would like the routine. They want some order. If they're constantly going, and by the way, I don't mean if they're going from one family member to another and everyone's taking time, that's still a order. But going from your house now to an out care, then over to here, that's something that's not going to necessarily sit well for them. So you really have to be honest with yourself and your family on what it is you can provide. And that will help your loved one have the longest possible life with this disease. All right. Live in the moment. I think Brian, I forget who said it. Live in the moment. Take them on vacation. Include them in vacations. When I take the kids on vacation, I bring my parents. You know, there's no reason that your life has to stop because of PD. You just make some adjustments. I'm not going to go somewhere and go, let's climb 1,000 steps, right? I would be crazy. My mom would tell you, yes, I got it. She would have her walking poles. She would try to do it. That would be on me to allow her to try it. And everyone would look at me, why did you let it happen? Because they're going to tell you they can do it. So you make some slight adjustments and everything else, but they can still have a very helpful life. My mom's a huge Warrior fan, huge one. Probably one of the biggest Parkinson patients who's diehard Warriors. She's yelling at the TV. I know if we take her to a game, which we need to go to a place where she doesn't have to take a lot of stairs to watch the game, right? So, you know, when we take her to the arena to go see, she can yell with everybody else. That's fine, but stairs aren't her friends, right? She can do
Absolutely.
some, but not a ton. So you make slight adjustments and you just live and enjoy the moment that we have today.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said, all of you. I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your day for this conversation and for all of you for joining us. I want to thank again Grove, Brian, Ruby, and Robert for taking your time for this discussion. And thank you all for joining us. And
Thank
peace.
you.
Thank you.
You will.
Thank you, everyone.